to adjust? Is there a way to adjust the screen resolution?
So the way I have it set up, I can actually drag the corners of the window to make it larger. If you can't do that directly, I'm using the paid version, not the professional, but the level below that. If you can't change the resolution just by dragging on the window, then we can check setup and see what options are available there. We have control, sound, display. Display might help. You can do borderless windows and full screen mode.
I got it to work.
There are other options available, but I don't think those will matter too much for this presentation. The only thing you might want to consider is I have mine set to imperial units under the others tab, so I can see my coaster in terms of feet, and then you can do the same for metric. So once you have the program opened and you've changed a few options with the setup, like the units, you'd go into the editor right here. Everybody can see my screen and everything. Right. Let's see. Right. So when you open the editor, the first thing you'll get is this blank screen. You might see just one blank view. That's because I've gone and set my preferences, File, Preferences, to View Layout, and I've set it to Quad View. So the first thing that we'll do is go to File, New. That'll create a new park.
Wait, you said it's in preferences if you want to change how many screens are up?
Yes, so I went to File, Preferences, and then you have View Layout. You're probably in single view to start. I like quad view.
So I just see view 1, 2, 3, 4.
Under View Layout?
It doesn't even say view layout. It's just over preset.
Okay, I'm assuming that is the difference between the demo and the paid version. So I would just personally go through each to see which one fits best.
Okay. I mean, this isn't even a demo. I think it's just the regular version.
Okay,
I don't know.
In that case, then I'll go show you again if you're following along. File and Preferences, and I'm under the Common tab. I got mine basically a year ago, and I'm not sure if it's been updated or changed since then.
Okay, under View Layout, that's where you can change it.
All right, cool. So I like the quad view personally because I can have a top view, front view, and one of the side views, as well as this perspective mode. So if you want a specific view to be in a certain place, you can click on the drop-down menu and change it from there. For the perspective mode, and it's just for this one, you can right-click in this window, and then now your mouse, you can use your mouse to control your camera. You can do the WASD to fly, and this is really good for inspecting different portions of the track and making sure that something you did in the side views actually came out correctly.
What buttons do you push to fly besides WASD?
What was that again?
What buttons do you push to fly never mind, I got it.
Yeah, you right-click in the perspective window anywhere until you can see yourself looking around. And then yeah, WASD to fly around. So I cannot see the chat. So if anybody has questions, just let me know and speak up with your microphone. So is everybody good? Have they created a new park and they have their windows set up the way they'd like it? Since I'm not hearing anything out of the ordinary, let's go ahead. So we've already created our park. Like I said, park settings, if you want to change the name, showing that you can change the environment as well. So you could have snow on your coaster if you override the default weather. And that's just stuff I'll show you. I'm not going to change that too much. So to start with the coaster, we'll start by laying down some track that'll become our station. So first, to start a coaster, we'll go to the coaster tab and then click New Coaster and give it a name. And then hit OK. And then we can change the coaster properties under the Coaster Properties tab. So you can see the style of the coaster, which I'm going to keep as a classic steel looping coaster. Then we won't change anything about the mode. You can even change the number of trains and cars per train and different colors that will go with the railings, the seats, and the cars. We won't be dealing with scripts because that's a little advanced. So to start laying track, we go to the Track tab, then Add Vertex. It looks like a blue ball in the sidebar. Then to start, I'll click here to add our first point right at the origin. Also, you can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel or doing the same with a laptop pad. You can also move and pan around with a right click on your top view, your front and side view, and so on. So I have my settings where it snaps basically every foot. So, and my grid size is also each square is 1 foot. So let's put down a track that's about 20 feet. And I'm going to double check that my grid size is actually that. All right, X of 20 feet. Yep. Yes, was there a question?
How do we set it to snap?
That part, let's see, I'll double check. File, let's see, is it File Preferences? Yes. You hit File. I'll do that again. You hit File, Preferences. In the same place that you chose what views you wanted, you can set a snap distance as well. So I have it at every 1 foot, so I'm dealing with edges or corners of the grid.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to just put down these 2 points, one at the origin and one 20 feet out. What I can now do is I can click on the track itself. When it highlights it, when I have it selected, it's highlighted in white. And then what I can do is go to Track, Section Type. So if you see that, you can choose track, station, lift, and so on. And so I'll set this to station. While I have it selected, I can also do type settings. So when I click type settings, I can choose what the entrances are. I can choose the typical wait time. Most of that you don't need to worry about or change. It's already set to basically send you out of the station about 5 miles per hour, or the equivalent in metric. So has everybody set down 2 points and created a track?
How do you access the XY thing again?
Okay, if I want to see the exact coordinates of a point, is that what you mean?
Yeah, the vertex
Okay,
panel.
so once I've added a vertex, I can double click on it, and that'll show me the X, Y, Z. And I can
Gotcha.
even change that. I can type in 40 feet, and it moves that one point to that exact coordinate.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to flip back and forth.
Yeah, I gotcha. It takes a little bit of getting used to. So that's why we're doing this walkthrough portion and kind of why we split it into two groups. So it's easier to answer your guys' question. So I'll go ahead and just put this back to my 20 feet by double clicking and changing the X coordinate. So after we have a track, I selected it and I went to section type, made it a station. Under type settings, I didn't have to change anything, but this is just to show you what you would do on a launch section if you wanted to change its speed and so on. So after we have that down, we'll start laying some more track into our lift hill. So I'm going to go back to add vertex, and I'm just going to start placing different points. I'm not worrying too much about the size right now. Of course, in an actual coaster, you're going to have constraints to work with, but I'm just demonstrating. So since I want this track to be flat and level, I've been using the top view. But once we start working with the lift hill, I'm going to want whichever view, front or side, which would be easiest to work with. So now I'm going to go down into front view to start building the hill. Zoom in. I'm using right click to pan around because I find that easier than dragging these bars. So then what I'm going to do is basically curve this into, then make it a fairly straight section for the lift. Let's see. I'm just going for a roughly 45-degree angle, but it doesn't matter too much. And then since I've just been clicking points, I want to see how tall I made this thing. So I can go to select, modify, double click on a vertex that I just put down, and it's almost 200 feet. Maybe I want my hill to be that tall. Sorry. That was a mistake. I should be looking at the Y coordinate. It's almost 100 feet. If I wanted to set it to exactly 100, I'd type it in. So then after I've created a hill, is everybody good so far? I've set down the track that I want, but there are a few things I want to do. Right now, this entire piece of track is in brown or orange, and that means that it's all currently set as a station. You look at the type settings, it's all in a station. But what you can do is break it up into different sections by adding a type separator. That's the blue disk that you see here. So if I go to type separator, I want to end my station at this point right here. So what I can do is, once I have my type separator selected, I can click down on a part of the track to separate it. So what you'll have is, this is currently the station. This right here means that it's currently just a track. If I left it like it is, there's nothing propelling the coaster like friction wheels. It's just a simple track that the coaster would roll on. I want to change that. I want to actually add another type separator before the hill. And I find the easiest view to do that is just the front view. So I can get the level portion of the track. I'll go back to select, modify. You can also drag these disks if you put it in the wrong place originally. But what you can do is then select a portion of track. I'm going to do section type, transport. Go to type settings, and then I can name it if I want. I can tell what type of transport it is, which I'm going to make friction wheels. I'm going to let it go to the default speed. Hit OK. And now it's highlighted yellow because it's a transport section type. And then I'll go up to here with the lift hill and actually set it to the section type lift. And then I can change the settings for that as well if I want. And I'm not going to do anything different with that. I'm going to leave it as a chain lift with that speed as an anti-rollback device. Is everybody good so far? Do you guys understand how to create a type from existing track, basically separate into a station and so on? Again, since I can't see the chat from share screen, you'll just have to give me feedback over the mic if I'm going too fast or too slow.
I just want to say one thing I like to do if I want to make a section of track straight, like on a lift, is I make two vertices. I think it's, yeah, I make two of them strict.
Yeah.
Is that a good idea?
One thing I like to do, when you say straight, you're talking about...
No, I said strict.
Oh, strict. Gotcha. So you want to make something strict? One thing I can do is I can double click on a vertex, make it strict. If I do that, then I can move this point anywhere along the track without moving it. Then we'll see if I change the coordinate of that. It doesn't actually change anything about the track. Kind of odd thing to think about, but even if you try to change the coordinates of this, the only thing you can do is just move the vertex forward or backward along the track that you've already made. If you want the vertex to never move at all through you dragging it by accident, then you would click, I'll show you the process again, double click on the vertex, click locked. Now if I try to drag it, it won't move. If I select multiple points and I try to drag them all, then that locked point won't move. I'm just going to do Control Z to undo that. And then hit Control Z again enough times until it's unlocked. Show you the darker blue means it's locked. Lighter blue means it's typical point. So did that answer your question?
I mean, I guess it was just, wasn't too much of a question. It was more just reassurance. Like, I like to make two vertices strict, and the track between the two would completely straighten it out. Because making a lift manually, like just putting down points that are sort of in a straight line, it's always hard to get it exactly right, exactly straight. But I find making two vertices strict, like two corresponding ones strict, it straightens the track out.
Okay, yeah, that's a good tip. And I have a few other ways that I personally like to do that, where let's say I'm using my top view right now. I want this to go in a straight line to the right. Let's say this little point, this arrow is right on the line I want all my points to be on. I can actually click a bunch of points that are not aligned. Find my endpoint. Okay, I want these to be on the same line. I want them to have the same Z coordinate. What I'll do is I'll double click on the correct point to see what it's at. It's at -20 feet for the Z coordinate. I can double click on the endpoint, set it to a Z coordinate of -20, just like the other point. And then now that the endpoints are on the same line, the line that I want, I can click, drag, highlight all those points, making sure I have the correct ones included. And then there are two options. Make straight, which will make it straight in all different views, X, Y, and Z. Or I can do make straight 2D top. And this would matter if I want to lift hill where all the points are different heights, and I just want them to be straight from my top view perspective. So when I hit that, all the points move into being a straight line. If I were to do that, if I were to do a make straight completely, then what would happen is you'd have a straight line coming from there to there. That's usually not what you want. So I love the make straight 2D top feature. See, but I want to delete these points since I was just making a point, just giving out that tip. I don't want my track to keep that. So where were we? Okay, station, which I made here, and I used a type separator to make a little transport track. I used another type separator to make this a lift hill. So after you'd make the lift hill, you would, of course, make it so the coaster can start its descent. And since I'm just freehanding it and I'm not too worried about the physics behind it, just for demonstration, that's why my my hill looks kind of shabby.
How do you turn that on?
Which part are you talking about?
The G-force noder.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. So in the same way that you have drop-down menus for the view, there's a drop-down menu in the middle of your window where you can choose the speed comb, you can choose the G-force comb, and so on. So that speed comb is, let's see, that speed comb is telling me that the lift hill will give me a constant speed up to the top because that's what the chain's providing. And then the coaster's picking up speed as it goes down the hill. Speed comb is very useful just for judging how fast you're going into a tight curve, but it's also useful if you have a hill or a loop and the coaster's, you can tell if the coaster's not going to make it. Usually you would avoid that by just knowing that your lift hill is probably going to be the tallest piece of the structure, unless you have some magnetic launch that'll help you negotiate any kind of hill or loop that you make. You know what? Since this is a little wonky, I'm actually going to do that make straight 2D top again. Let's see, these points are where I want them. So I'm going to make straight 2D top, just make that a typical hill, going straight into a lift hill. There's another option that you can use if you don't have a good looking path. You want it to be a little bit smoother of a curve. You can highlight all the points that are kind of disjointed, go to element, and then depump vertices. And it will change the position of some of your points. Usually it'll make it smoother, but there might be certain times when you didn't want a point to move at all. And that's when I could lock these points. I may have to do it individually now that I'm looking at it. Yeah. So and then if I were to depump all these vertices, it would smooth out the curve, except it would not move any of those points that I just locked. So I'm going to go back to my top view. And so I just made my hill. I want to make just a small turn. Let's see what's going on here. I'm going to use this as a guideline. And see, that's going to be an issue right here. Okay. So I'm going to make a turn that's not circular, but it's going to be roughly parabolic or just a curve that's a little bit smoother so that the g-forces aren't so intense. And then again, I'll highlight the points that I want to smooth out, go to element, and depump the vertices. So I'm going to take a look at my coaster again. See that? Oh, I just noticed that since it's highlighted in green, all this section is considered a lift hill. So what I want to do is I want to add a type separator at the top. And so I went back to the track, add type separator, clicked on this hill. And now that portion is just a lift hill, and this portion in blue is now just your standard track. So now I've made this turn. Then what I'm going to do is keep adding vertices to the track. Now, when I'm adding that point, it's like you can stick it up in the air for some reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually set this value to 8 feet. That's going to get it compliant again. Now I'm going to make a straightaway. I'm still having that issue again for some reason. So far, I have a little bit of a station, which I'll probably make longer. I have a lift hill. It's going to have a drop. We have a curb. And then I'm going to create a little more complicated. I'm going to add a loop to this track. So what I can do is, if I'm making something like a loop or a corkscrew, I can add element under the Elements tab. Add an element. And here you have cobra rolls, corkscrews, curves, and a lot of other options. There's even a formula for a straight track if you prefer that over hand building. So can you guys get to the add element section? Matt? All right. So now that I had clicked add element, I can add this loop, and it gives me a few prompts, like the radius of the loop. So I'll give it 40 feet. So again, it shows that it's a half height. So if I give it a radius of 40 feet, the loop is going to be 80 foot tall. Then the tightness of the loop. This 0.3 value is a typical teardrop or clothoid shape, which is what you would typically see in a track. And that's just done to kind of even out kind of even out the g-forces a rider would feel. And since a lot of the positive g-forces will be stronger at the bottom of the loop, by having this teardrop shape, you're kind of minimizing the vertical g-forces that you would feel entering or exiting the loop. So after I've checked the tightness, the shift just tells me if I enter it, when I come out the other end, I'll be 8 foot to the left. See right here. Now, the thing is, when you add it in, it's not actually going to add it to the endpoint of the track. You might have to move it around a little bit with select modify. So if you guys have added in your loop, you can select it, drag it all the way over here. Let's see. The one issue we'll have is that we'd have to rotate this. Yeah. Okay. So actually, I'm going to recreate this loop, but have it in the correct direction. So I'll show you guys again. Add element, loop formula. Going to leave everything to default. Shift. And then let's see. Track. Okay, here we go. You go to the track section, click rotate. That'll rotate all the highlighted elements. And then get it roughly the correct orientation. You can drag it over, and then you can connect the two. So what I'll do is I'll control click this end, control click that end, and hit connect. As you can see, there's a tiny little dip. So I'm going to go into another view to try to get that level. So once I've highlighted the loop, I'm going to drag it up. And then now I have this coaster with a lift hill going into a curve, and then a loop right here. And as you can see, the loop is almost as tall as the coaster. Since the coaster's at 100 feet, the loop's at 80 feet. In a perfect world with no energy losses, then the coaster would make this loop, even if it was the same height as the lift hill. But because of friction and drag, I'm going to look at the speed cone. I see that the cart loses speed right near the top. It'd be very disappointing because it would fall back down to the ground. So one thing I'm going to do is just modify my lift hill for this example, so it's a little bit easier than trying to modify this loop since it's a certain formula. So now I have my speed cone ready. I can see that the coaster has a certain speed when it reaches the top, and it will come back down. So I keep adding a few vertexes. And I'm still receiving that issue. I'm not really sure why, because when I tested this before, they were all correct. They were all just acting normally. But for the sake of time, I'm going to just complete the track. Then get to here. I'm going to control click the 2 points, and I'm going to connect them again with the connect button. As you can see, this isn't a very clean looking curve because I did this quickly. So I'm going to highlight all of these points and depump again.
Just did the same thing with me, by the way, with the up in the air.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason why they created it that way. But what I like to do is double click that arrow tip. And that's when you can see the coordinates again, like the Y coordinate. For my program, my ground level coordinates are 8 feet. So as you can see, the same thing happened with all of these. I can click them one by one, or I could try to drag them down. If you have something like this happening to you, sometimes it's just easiest to do that. To click all of them, make them 8 feet tall like you meant to. The more you use the program, when you run into unexpected things like these, you'll have the answers to solve them. That's why we're trying to do a walkthrough. If you guys have any questions or issues, we can work through them together. And this last one, I'll also make 8 feet. And let's see that again. Since it depumped the vertices, basically smoothed out all these points, smoothed out this curve based on the height they were originally at, I want to depump again. So that smooths out the curve based on this horizontal, like flat turn. So let's see. So here, if we look at the speed comb again, this coaster is going fairly slow as it coasts into the station. I'll have to add another type separator because once I connected the two pieces of track, it thought this end of the track was also part of the station. So I'm going to add this type separator here. I'm going to click this track section, go to section type, make it a typical track, which will be blue. Then this section, I'm going to check it again. Now, making sure that's still a station. So one other thing I'd like to mention is that when you have these turns, okay, I'm having a few issues. It thinks this right here is also a station. Okay, here we go. So with all of this done, one thing that happens with the coaster, I'm going to show you with the G-force cones. This is always good to check. You can see that the G-force values are red in the lateral direction.
No.
Because there's no banking on this curve. So it's like your body is being thrown to the side. Now you're going to feel a lot of force coming from the right wall or the right side of your restraint.
Something is very.
Are you
able
referring to what I'm looking at?
No, to what I'm looking at. Are you able to enable screen sharing?
Yeah, I can enable screen sharing. One thing they'll ask you to do is if you have a little thumbnail that's showing gallery view or showing other people's faces or names, if you see anything like that, try to minimize it. If you don't see it right now, you'll see it in screen sharing.
Okay.
All right, so let's see how to allow it. I'm gonna pause my screen share while I look at the settings available. Actually, I'll be right back in a second.
Good for you.
All right. Let's see. I'm just currently looking for those share settings.
I think I figured it out. Never mind.
All right. Could you explain what the
Yeah.
situation was? Yeah.
When I did it, I made a vertex in the wrong place that I didn't notice. I think I made two super close, so there was like a little spike, and it caused my entire G-force thing to go insane. See, there was red everywhere.
Ah, okay, yeah. In that situation, there are a few options. You can double click a vertex and, sorry, not double click, just single click a vertex and delete it if you didn't want two of them together. You could also, you could make a vertex strict, but that might not also be what you want to do. But yeah, those are a few things. You can also zoom in if you have two vertexes really close. Other thing you can do is depump those vertices like we've been doing before with element. Highlight the two problem points, depump to get a smooth curve. But yeah, the thing I wanted to show with this curve is that we have no banking at all. So you'd be thrown to the side. This red shows that you have a very high lateral G-force currently. Now, sometimes the program will give you some amount of banking on its own, but it's better to actually set that stuff yourself. So the way to do that is go to track, add roll. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that the riders are actually entering with 0 degrees, where there's no banking at all. And I'll make it strict. Now, making a roll point strength is a little bit different. It just means that the roll point angle will not change. The track has to be at 0 degrees. So I'm going to do that at the beginning and the end. And you can do the same thing from top view if you wanted to add a roll point right here. You can add a roll point from the top view, double click on it, make sure it's 0, make sure it's strict. So now that I make sure that the riders will enter and exit with a 0 degree bank or 0 degrees of banking, what I can do is I can add a few rolls throughout the ride, or throughout the curve, I mean. Select, I can do no lateral G-forces. And as you can see, this is going to take a fairly high amount of banking for the speed that I gave it. If you had a very tight section of track where you couldn't just make this turn larger, what I would do is probably put a trim brake. I'll show you a little bit. Like you could put a trim brake on part of it, and you could make the section type brake. You can do friction brake or magnetic brake. You can give it a speed limit so that any car exiting that brake section will have to go a certain speed. The deceleration, you have to make it high enough that a car will actually be slowed down to 22 or 25. I'm just going to undo that because that's not what I'm trying to show with this. So now that I've added my rolls, which I did with track, add roll, clicked on the track, and then double click to change their angles. I'm going to take another look, make sure that my speed comes correct with this loop. Yeah, it'll still make the loop. You can actually add different brake sections, like a block brake, which we use to separate two cars in an e-stop. So let's say for some odd reason, whether it's windy or another reason like that, a car wouldn't make the lift hill or wouldn't make the loop. You can add a brake section so that another car that's coming around this curve would be stopped. You probably essentially want two areas so that the cars don't collide. So I can go back to type separator and click right here. change the section type to a break. I want it to be a block break. Now it's not actually going to come to a complete stop. The speed limit, I'm actually just going to put at an arbitrarily high value because this block break shouldn't be engaged under normal circumstances. It would just only be during an e-stop. So I don't actually want this break to slow cars down under normal operation. So I'm going to put just a fair. There's also usually one more block break than the number of trains you want, just so that there's a buffer there. So to prevent any kind of collision. So again, I'll do the section type break. And type settings, block break. I'll do the same thing. I'll just make this a very high value because I don't want it to normally break cars under normal circumstances. And then the coaster train would go through this curve, where I'd have to do roll points again. Because if I look at my G-force cone, I'm getting these yellows and reds because it's unbanked. So the reason that a banked curve works is it's really just changing the directions of the acceleration or forces that a rider would feel. Because of centripetal acceleration, where when you're going around a curve, you'd have to be accelerated towards the center. If you were just perfectly vertical, the only way to be pulled towards the center, or pushed towards the center, I should say, would be left and right lateral forces. But if you were banked, then the seat, the part that you're sitting on, would push you towards that center with vertical G's. Essentially, like relative to you, that would be up or down. And people can tolerate vertical G's a lot better than lateral G's, and that part of that is due to spinal support and backrest having a seat versus having no headrest, and the lateral forces are usually less tolerated. But let's see what I'm saying. Okay, so I want this to be 0 before going into the turn. I'm going to make it strict. Then I like to add a few roll points. So, see, one here, one here, one here. I'll add this one at the straightaway. Make sure it's strict. And I'll do the same process that I did before. No lateral G-forces. So NoLimits2 will calculate what angle it needs to be banked so that instead of being thrown to the left or the right, the car is angled so that the floor and the seat you're sitting on is pushing you from your perspective vertically to negotiate a turn. You don't feel a whole lot from the walls. As you can see, you still get some lateral G's sometimes. These roll points will minimize the lateral G's right at that specific point. So you still have to worry about lateral G's. In this situation, what I would do is I would actually add a trim brake to slow down the coaster before entering a turn that's too tight for the speed it currently is going. So yeah, here's the speed cone. That speed is too high because the G-forces are still moving laterally, especially right at the very end. So I'm going to go to type separator. And I'm going to add another brake section right here. So I'm going to go section type, brake, type settings, trim brake. See what happens if I change it to 30. I'm making this a friction brake. I can change it to magnetic if you like, just to show you. So I'm going to look at my speed comb to make sure that that didn't stop the coaster in its tracks somewhere along the way. Since I just changed what speed the coaster would be entering, got to see no lateral g-forces. Got to update my roll points to reflect that. Because the conditions those roll points were made in originally influence the way the roll points, what angle the roll points are at. And if you change those conditions, then you have to go back and change each roll point. I'm going to make sure that one's, yeah, that's 0 and it's strict. I'm going to make this another break section too. Like when a coaster's in the station and there's some kind of hold up and another coaster is coming in, then I want that coaster to be waiting right behind the queue, right behind the station. So section type, break. I want them to come to a complete stop, and then I'll get them going again. So I have this break section type settings. I want it to be a block break. Then complete stop. Just going to give it a wait time of 1 second. You don't have to make it a complete stop always, but that's how I'm choosing to do it. I'm changing the amount of deceleration just to make sure that it gets slowed to a certain amount. If I want a coaster to come to a complete stop, I also need a way to get it going again. So I have to enable transport device. And then I could choose friction wheels or linear motor, and then the speed. The reason this is here is if you wanted the coaster car to stop at a scene and then make a magnetic launch into the rest of the coaster, you would make it stop for the amount of time that you'd have a scene take place, like maybe 10 seconds. And then you could do a linear motor and make it a huge launch. But I'm not gonna do that, obviously, because this is just for getting to the station again. I'm gonna give it a complete stop of 1 second. So even if there's no e-stop, this coaster's supposed to halt at that section. And friction wheels, okay. There are visual elements you can add, such as the supports, and I'm just gonna run through this part. So you have the prefab panel, the supports panel, and then you have choose prefab. And you can choose from a whole bunch of different structures that are just visual. So track default double. So again, I did supports, choose prefab, chose the one I wanted. Now my cursor has this little red logo, which basically means I can put down supports wherever I'd like. So I can click anywhere on the track and it'll make these supports. And I can do this throughout the whole ride if I'd like. And those are just good to add a little finishing touch. The terrain as well, you can do different things with that, like modify height. I can drag this hill up, and it's not going to change the height of the track. Even with supports, those supports are just visual. I mean, if you do it incorrectly, you can have the terrain passing through the track because the terrain's not pushing anything out of the way. And scenery, you can go to choose. You can go through the library. You can have effects. You can have trees. So there's a cedar tree. Now that I've chosen it here, I can add object. It'll even make the trees different heights. Another thing you can do with scenery is that when you choose it, there's a various tab where you can add the clearance envelope script, which will just add that orange around your coaster. Since this block just means that, oh, the script has been added, it doesn't matter where I place it. It's not going to show up in the POV. you can also choose a few different things like like video. If you wanted a video screen, and different effects like fog machines and fire effects. But we won't go over those kinds of stuff in this tutorial. So when you are satisfied with your coaster or want to ride in a POV, what you would do is go back to coaster. You would freeze that coaster. And then you'll see what it would actually look like in the POV. There's no ride building in this section. Since I didn't change any of the colors, it's all white. You can see the supports I added here, but since I didn't add any supports anywhere else, they don't show up. One thing I'm gonna add is I think, let's see. Oh, okay, I see. I set my type separator such that the station isn't very long. Station got removed. So what I'm going to do is have to add another type separator again. Go to section type and do the station. That's why I wasn't seeing the building earlier. There it is. So there's station, there's the transport, the lift hill, and so on. So I'm going to go to File, Save, Leave Editor, then Play. And then what you can do is go to H for help. It'll show you different options you have. One of those is FN F2 will show you the G-forces that your coaster is experiencing, as well as the speed. It even tells you the duration, or not the duration, the intensity. What I can also do is slow this down to quarter speed so I can see how these numbers change, or pause if I want to look at a certain section.
Just a heads up, for the demo version, you can't save your coaster if there's more than 2.
And as I can see, there's a little kink where the loop wasn't really aligned, and that would be something I'd go back and fix. There are even different viewing options. If I hit E, I can do the fly view. There's a flyby view and so on. And that's by hitting the E button, and I can see those different views. And no, it's not pretty because we were just trying to go through it quickly and show proof of concept. But that's what you would be doing in your actual project, is fixing those little things, making it just right. So do you guys have any questions? Are you guys having any trouble?
Is there a way to see your ride POV without going out? Because it's not letting us save. Or it wouldn't let me save, at least because of the demo.
Okay, so those are the save restrictions that are available. What you can do is, I'm back in my editor. I can go to any of my windows. I'm going to choose this one. Go to the drop-down menu and choose track. And it's not a true POV, unfortunately. But what you can do is you can right-click in this screen. Allows you to look around. Use the W and the S key to go forward and back. And again, I know that's not going to tell you the speed that your coaster is traveling, but it will show you what it looks like from a rider's point of view.
I must be an idiot, but how did you get rid of the wireframe?
Oh, how I got rid of the wireframe. Thank you for bringing that up. That's what you do is you go to the coaster tab. when your coaster is in wireframe mode, like it's editable, you can hit freeze coaster. What that does is it kind of finalizes the changes you've made so far and shows you a POV kind of visual of what the coaster would look like, track supports and all.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so once you've frozen it, that's when you can save and, well, with the paid version, leave the editor, go into play and ride a coaster. And again, you have options like FN, F2, so you can see your speed and your G-forces. If you're in the editor, it gives you a rough idea of the G-forces with those combs, but to my knowledge, there isn't a way to directly see that except for maybe exporting a G-force graph into an application like Excel. We didn't touch on any of the advanced stuff because that has scripting and lighting, which you would have for scenes. You can have imported objects, which is what NoLimits2 is, and the textures that go with them, which is what Matte Editor is for. So now that we've made a simple track, I highly suggest you go back through these videos or look at the link provided in the presentation, because I know doing it live, it can be a little bit difficult, and with a video, you can always go back. We have a YouTube channel set up where you can see this session and other past recordings. So that being said, that's all I have to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about today or NoLimits2 in general.
I got one question. So I forget what it's called, but I know I think it was mentioned before that there's something you can attach to your coaster train, so you know the reaching limits of, I forget what that's called. But.
Yeah, so it's called the clearance envelope.
That's
and
it.
what you do is you go into scenery, you can choose it. So by default, it'll show you these folders of different things that you can put in the park. And so some of them are visual like trees, but under various, let's see, it's not letting me open it for some reason. I'm gonna get out of that. I know why, because I still have the coaster frozen. These graphics mean that the coaster's been finalized and you can't edit it until you unfreeze it. I'm gonna go to scenery, choose, various, clearance envelope. I would hit OK, and then I'd add the object somewhere in the park, just with a left click. Since I've already done it, I'm not going to place it again. And then you can explore the scenery tab because there are other things like demo objects, where you can have an external track camera. It runs along the track like your coaster. So it'd be like looking at the roller coaster from the seat of another train. You also have a few different rides like a Ferris wheel and so on as background scenery. And a track trigger test, which is for testing out, okay, a coaster just passed through this point. This is when this scene or animation or sound effect would trigger. And there are plenty of videos out there for more advanced options like animation, scripting, and so on. But yeah, so it's called the clearance envelope script, and I'm gonna freeze this coaster and show you what that looks like. So from this point of view, it's not very easy to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the E button, and that changes to a few different view modes. For some reason, I'm not seeing it added, even though I tested that just before our session. So I'm going to see what's going on with that. But yeah, the clearance envelope script is what should be used. What I'm gonna do is delete that, go to scenery, and just re-add it. I'm gonna add that object as close to the train as possible in case that helps. And I'll go back to freeze the coaster again. Hit E. There it is. I'm going to hit the E button again to see a different view. There's a flyby view where it's locked onto the coaster and you have a little bit of a range of motion. Here's another one, hitting the E button again. Pursuit view. E button again is target view, which is cinematic. So since there's not a whole lot of scenery, it's not going to collide. But you can combine this with FN F2. FN F2 slows it down and even pauses at different sections. So if you ever had something like a hill that I made or a tree in there that would ever cross this orange outline, that's when you know that there's something in the patron envelope and it needs to be moved or removed completely. Are there any other questions, general questions, or about this track in particular? Again, after you've made it, you can add different colors if you want the car to look a certain way or the rails. I'm gonna check the chat if I can. Let's see. Okay. So that's all I have to share with you. Thank you for attending. And again, you can watch any of these videos online through the YouTube channel. And if you ever need to know what that is, you can ask in the skills session channel of the Discord.
Thank you, Cameron.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
All right. See you guys later.